Hello my friends, in today's video I'm gonna rank every chapter in Dead by Daylight, from the best one to the worst one. Keep in mind that most likely you will not 100% agree with me. This is gonna be my personal opinion and I'm gonna be biased. I have played and enjoyed some chapters more than the other chapters, and when it comes to Dead by Daylight's tier list, everybody has their own opinions and basically every tier list is different, and I think that's kind of beautiful, and I think that this tier list is gonna surprise many of you because I hate some of the most beloved chapters in Dead by Daylight, so I'm gonna rank them lower on this tier list. And with that out of the way, I got one more thing to show you.
Hey, stop! Why? I just don't get it. I always catch you fuckers watching this sick shit. This is sickening.
Got your blood clot, man.
This man is right. Stop looking at those disgusting SpongeBob feet pics.
Stop it. Get some help.
And
Bam.
I can help you. Start watching Boy Dilly instead. I make Dead by Daylight videos and I got a very big cock. Also, look at this beautiful dog. Yeah, he's dead now. But anyway, don't forget to subscribe to my channel to make me a happy little boy. Also, you can become my supporter by clicking that jingly wingly join button. I will play Dead by Daylight with you, you will get an exclusive Discord role, and you will get to see some exclusive secret videos. Join now and satisfy your inner needs. Anyway, let's get straight into the video. Okay, so the order of these chapters is gonna be random, as you can see, and also I'm gonna exclude paragraphs because I don't think it's fair to compare big chapters with paragraphs. With an exception for Ghostface, I know that this is technically a paragraph, but believe it or no, I googled it and it turns out that Ghostface is actually considered to be a full chapter, even though there is no map, no survivor. Technically it's just one killer, but yeah, developers for some reason consider Ghostface to be a chapter, so I'm gonna rank Ghostface on this list. So, The Last Breath, the first DLC of Dead by Daylight, and this DLC has some amazing content. I think that this chapter has very great perks for both the killer and survivors, and one of my favorite killer perks is Nurse's Calling, and it comes with this chapter. Also Balanced Landing, Urban Evasion, all of these perks, they come with The Last Breath, so this chapter has some great perks. Not to mention, this chapter has the strongest killer in Dead by Daylight, which is the nurse. And I really love the nurse. I think that to start playing as the nurse, it requires a bunch of patience because it's very difficult to play as the nurse. But then as you learn to play this killer, it becomes very fun and I love the nurse. Also, Nia is actually a good survivor and it came with this chapter. I don't have anything against this chapter, and I don't think it's like S tier chapter or anything like that because there are better chapters than this one, but it introduced DLCs and I believe that this chapter is a really good one actually, so I think it belongs on the A tier. Oh, and one more thing is that this chapter introduced the Asylum map, and that map is not a great map in my opinion, but it's not a bad map, and I'm glad it's in the game. Okay, a Lullaby for the Dark. Lullaby, lullaby, however the fuck you like to call it. This killer introduces the Huntress, which is a killer that truly requires skill, and it's very fun to play as the Huntress actually. This is one of the better killers that Dead by Daylight has ever got. And also we got David King with some of the best survivor perks in the game. Introduction of Dead Heart, do I need to say more? Also we got Red Forest, which is a pretty bad map. So just because of the map, which in my opinion is worse than the Asylum, I think for now I'm gonna place it right here. Okay, Tools of Torment. This killer, the School Merchant, is fucking thick. She has that ass, okay? S tier. Okay, All Kill. This chapter is trash, okay? This killer, the Trickster, is a it's a K-pop star. And K-pop does not belong in Dead by Daylight. Not to mention it has almost nothing to do with horror. I'm not a fan of the Survivor either. No map. The story of the killer wasn't bad. I guess that's the benefit of this chapter. But I'm not too much into Dead by Daylight's lore anyway. So I have to put this chapter over here. I was disappointed with this chapter. When it came out, I expected something better, and many people agree with me. Something I really like about All Kill is that I have always found the Trickster as a very sexy killer, okay? You can call me gay as fuck, but I think that the Trickster is a sexy killer. Okay, I'm not gonna be kidding you no more. Tools of Torment actually sucks, okay? Sucks big black American cock, no racism, okay? This chapter belongs right here. It's even worse than All Kill, and you know, I'm not even gonna have a debate about this chapter. I mean, who the fuck likes School Merchant? Who? I mean, no one, right? She has the worst Mori in the game. She is very good at making games last for like 30 or 40 minutes because she is good at holding 3 gens. Other than that, she is a trash killer, so D tier. Okay, The Nightmare on the Elm Street. I'm a big fan of horror movies. I'm not a big fan of Nightmare on the Elm Street. Dead by Daylight has never got a license for the original Nightmare on the Elm Street, but I really love Freddy as a killer in Dead by Daylight. I think Freddy is very fun to play as, if you don't mind losing games, because Freddy is one of the weakest killers in Dead by Daylight, but that doesn't stop Freddy from being fun to play, and I think that's something important. Also, Springwood is a decent map actually. I like Springwood, not all the time, but I think it's a pretty good map. What else? Survivor with this chapter is shit. This chapter doesn't have any good perks. The only saving grace for this chapter is it's fun to play as Freddy, C tier. Chains of Hate. This chapter has one of the most boring maps to play for killers. I hate the map. The killer itself, the Death Slinger, he's a good killer, and he is fun to play actually. Surprisingly, it requires skill to play as this killer, because this is the first killer with a gun, and it plays significantly different than any other ranged killer in Dead by Daylight. This chapter has some really good perks. Off the Record, for example, it's a meta perk right now for survivors. Even though this chapter doesn't have a cool survivor, I don't like Zarina. Dead Man's Switch came with this chapter, which is one of the meta perks for killers. So overall, it's a mixed bag of a chapter. Not a big fan, but it's definitely better than Nightmare on the Elm Street. Okay, Cursed Legacy. Now, this is gonna be one of the more controversial opinions of mine, but I think that this is my favorite original chapter in the game. I have never had this much fun in Dead by Daylight as I had back in the day on the PTB for this chapter. I really love Yui as a survivor. This chapter brought some cool perks into the game, not to mention the killer itself, what the fuck is wrong with me? The Oni is a solid A tier killer, and I play Oni pretty regularly, even these days. I think that the map that came with this chapter is looking pretty great. I really like that map. What else about this chapter? I think overall it's just a very, very great chapter, and it's definitely above all of these chapters. So far, this is the first chapter that goes into the S tier. Darkness Among Us. I love this chapter. I started playing Dead by Daylight right after this chapter was released, and Legion was my main killer for almost 2 years. I only played Legion for almost 2 years. This chapter has some really cool perks, like Discordance. This chapter has some really cool perks, like for the killer Discordance, Iron Maiden, for Survivor Aftercare. I never use Aftercare, but some of my friends really rely on this perk. And also Ormond is a really unique looking map. It's the first winter-themed map in Dead by Daylight, and still the only winter-themed map in Dead by Daylight. I know some people dislike Ormond because it's actually not the best map to provide good visibility for the killer side, but I have never truly found much of a problem with Ormond, and I believe that this is a solid A tier chapter. I know that when Legion was released, community hated this killer and Legion had a bunch of problems, but I never hated Legion, even when everybody was like, oh, this killer is trash, this killer is weak. I was proudly playing Legion every single day, and I think I'm still a good Legion player, and I love Legion. So when everybody is complaining and saying that this killer needs a buff, I say that this killer is pretty good. The only downside of Legion is that it's very annoying for survivors to go against the Legion. Okay, Demise of the Faithful. Fuck. Okay, Demise of the Faithful. So this chapter brought a very unique killer, the Plague. This killer is one of the most unique killers to ever hit Dead by Daylight. Like literally, without cleansing, you can't heal yourself. I remember when this chapter came out, people who brought their typical traditional builds into the game against the Plague would always lose games because these builds, they would not help them. I really love that this killer is different than other killers. I also like the map that came with this chapter. It recently got a rework. What else? This chapter has the thickest survivor in the game, Jane. There was a point of my life when I was so horny, I even thought about maining this survivor. This chapter has some really cool perks, including Corrupt Intervention. So this perk literally redefined the game as it is, because nowadays every single trap-based killer, for example, Trapper, Hag, the Singularity, etc., like Demogorgon, they all rely on Corrupt Intervention. And also Head On is, in my opinion, one of the better exhaustion perks in the game. So I don't really have much of a downside with this chapter, besides that sometimes it's just very annoying to face the Plague, but it's still the S tier chapter. Come on, guys. Okay, the Descent Beyond. We got the Blight, which is arguably one of the best killers in the game in terms of strength. I don't like the new survivor, Felix. We didn't get any new map. Back in the day, I remember playing this chapter on the PTB. It was a torture. I didn't even like the Blight as a killer. Nowadays, I really like Blight, but I don't think that this chapter has brought any truly good perks besides Undying. Wait, fuck, so it has brought good perks. I think that Undying is the best perk this chapter has to offer. I think that the fact that the Blight is a good killer and Undying came with this chapter saves this chapter from being a terrible chapter. And in my opinion, this is a B tier chapter. I would actually put it below Lullaby for the Dark. Okay, a Binding of Kin chapter. So this chapter introduced a really unique killer. This killer is the twins. So basically 2 killers in one. Technically it's a very cool concept, but when this chapter came out, even after the PTB, this chapter has to be one of the buggiest chapters in Dead by Daylight's history. It wasn't fun to play as this killer. This chapter is pretty controversial because some people say that this chapter belongs in the S tier because the killer is really good. Other people believe that this chapter is such a trash because it's just a buggy mess and nobody really likes playing as this killer that it deserves to be right here. In my opinion, I don't think that Binding of Kin is a trash chapter, but I think it would be a sin to put this chapter above C tier. I mean, Elodie is technically a cool survivor. This chapter also introduced one of the funner gimmicky perks in the game, which is Deception. But other than that, I don't think this chapter has any significant game-changing perks, and I always hated playing as the twins. And I don't think that any of you are playing twins, because when I play Survivor, I never get to play against the twins. So yeah, I think that explains a lot. Okay, the latest chapter and transmission. Okay, where do I start? This killer is very unique. This is the first killer who is able to shoot projectiles and then access the cameras on those projectiles at any given time. This killer has a very unique way of infecting survivors. The new survivor is pretty great. This chapter has strangely very good perks, especially for survivor side. We got very good perks, my favorite one being Made for This. Made for This is one of the best survivor perks to come in a while. It makes survivors faster without completely destroying killers, and I think it's a balanced perk, yet it's a very controversial perk. And also other 2 perks that came with this chapter are pretty great as well. So I think the chapter is pretty good, but there's a big but. The map sucks, okay? This chapter has one of the worst maps in the game. I mean, I don't hate how the map looks. I hate that it's just too dense. We need more open maps. And even though this is exterior map, which technically is supposed to be open, you know, all of the exterior maps are hella open. I think the most problematic maps in the game are interior maps, but Transmission introduces an outdoor map, which feels like it's an indoor map. And it's a problem. I hate the map. Also, I don't think I will be playing Singularity anymore. It's not because the killer is bad. I think the killer is pretty good. It's just not for me. So I think it's a B tier chapter, and we could even put it into the A tier, but for some reason I feel like I need to put it into B tier. So this is gonna be a higher B tier chapter. Okay, Forged in War. This has to be one of the most disappointing chapters in Dead by Daylight. When I saw the leaks of the Night Killer, I imagined something unreal. I thought we would get the first killer on a horse. That would be so cool, and it's totally possible for developers to make a killer like that. And they made another generic killer, the first killer that utilizes AI, and I don't find it fun at all. I think it's a better chapter than Tools of Torment. Also, the map with this chapter is not that great. It's not a terrible map, but it just doesn't feel special at all. There's no reason for me to want to play on that map. The survivor that came with this chapter is not good either. I mean, he's just a typical old man. Why would I want to main him over something like Feng Min? I don't know. Even perks in this chapter are not great. So I think it's a D tier chapter. The only question is it better than All Kill or no? I think that thinking now, it's a little bit worse than all kill, but they are pretty close. Okay, Hellraiser. Technically it's a paragraph, but yet again, for some reason it's classified as a full chapter. It's chapter 21, and I will never understand how is this a full chapter if the only thing we got with this chapter is the killer. I think that Hellraiser is a really cool movie. I really enjoyed the movie Hellraiser, and this killer has a bunch of cool backstory, but for some reason in Dead by Daylight all of that backstory is basically non-existent. This chapter had some big major problems because this is the first and the only NFT chapter in the game, which makes me want to believe that this is the worst chapter in the game because I hate NFT stuff. I really hope it will never happen again. But yet again, because I think that Hellraiser is a really good franchise, and Pinhead is a really cool killer. I love his appearance in the game. I think his power is pretty unique and he has some of the best killer animations in the entire game. Also, this is, I think, the first killer with voice lines. I believe this is the first killer with voice lines, correct me if I'm wrong. And these voice lines, they became very popular memes, and I love that. So I think it's not that bad, besides the fact that it's the only NFT chapter in the game. So I think I will put it into the higher C tier category, maybe even B tier. I think lower B tier would justify this chapter pretty well. Flesh and Mud. This chapter is a very iconic chapter. It introduced Hex perks into the game, and this chapter has some really cool perks. Hex Devour Hope is technically the strongest perk in the game, but it's a very risky perk, but it came with this chapter. Hex Ruin was the strongest perk in the game back in the day when I started playing Dead by Daylight. And this chapter introduced that perk as well. Hag is a very interesting killer, and I really love Hag actually. I think it's fun to play as Hag. I think it's fun to play against the Hag. Survivor, Ace Visconti. I don't see a reason for anybody to play this Survivor. I don't think there's anything cool about the Survivor. This chapter also introduced Swamp, which is, I think, the only unreworked map in Dead by Daylight yet. I know a lot of people hate Swamp. I don't hate Swamp. I know I'm a weird person, but I like Swamp. I have never hated Swamp. And I don't see much of a problem with this chapter. I think overall it's a pretty great chapter, and it belongs on the A tier. I think it's an awesome chapter altogether. Maybe even better than Legion's chapter, thinking now. Not better than the Nurse's chapter, but better than Legion's chapter. It belongs right here in the middle. Ghostface. Okay, I'm gonna be a little bit biased. Scream is one of my favorite horror franchises ever. I don't like that this chapter doesn't have any survivor or a map, but you know, just looking at Ghostface's mask, it makes me excited to play Dead by Daylight. I think it's one of the best stealth killers in Dead by Daylight. It's just fun to kill survivors with Ghostface's knife. I also like the Mori of this killer very much. This chapter brought some cool perks, like I'm All Ears is a very good perk for the Nurse and Pyramid Head. And also Thrilling Tremors is a very good perk for Freddy players. So I think this chapter has brought some really amazing perks. And just because I'm very biased, I want to put this chapter pretty high on this list, but I can't put this chapter high on this list because it doesn't have any survivor and it doesn't have any killer. So I think I'm gonna put it in the B tier, very high B tier, right here. Portrait of a Murder, very good perks. It introduced Pain Resonance into the game and also Hex Pentimento, so two very good killer perks. For Survivor, we got Overcome, which is a very cool exhaustion perk. While I am not a big fan of Overcome, I think it's a very useful perk. I don't think that Jonah is a cool survivor in any way. I think he's a little bit too fat. The killer doesn't look too good design, like visual design wise, but the artist has a cool power. I think her birds make her a strong killer, and sometimes it's just fun to play as the artist. It's not a bad killer at all. Forsaken Boneyard is a terrible map in my opinion, especially when it comes to playing as the Trapper. You can't really play Trapper on this map because survivors will easily spot your traps, so I think developers missed the mark with the map, and I don't know where to put this chapter now. Higher C tier probably. It's not terrible, but this chapter just lacks something, okay? It has some great perks. You know what? I'm wrong, sorry about that. I'm putting it above Hellraiser. Because thinking now, this is not an NFT chapter at the very least. Okay, Resident Evil chapter, the first Resident Evil chapter. Thanks to the first Resident Evil chapter, I got a bunch of new YouTube subscribers. It was a very good time for my YouTube channel. I have never played Resident Evil games. I was not hyped for this chapter. I really like the introduction of zombies. So yeah, I'm sorry, I think previously I said that the Knight is the first killer to utilize AI. That's not true. Resident Evil was the first chapter to utilize AI power because it has zombies, and I think zombies is a very good addition to Dead by Daylight. Nemesis is not a bad killer at all. Survivors look cool actually in this chapter. The only downside is the map, and it's a big downside because I hate Resident Evil map. I think that RPD is the worst map in Dead by Daylight. Even after the recent rework, it's the worst map in fucking Dead by Daylight. Remove RPD, okay? Just because of the worst map in Dead by Daylight, this chapter goes into the higher C category, and seriously, Killer saves this chapter. I know this is controversial, I know that many of you will want to punch me in the fucking face for this, but I can't, I hate this map. Okay, Curtain Call. This chapter introduces the Clown, which is, I think Clown is a very fun killer to play. He's a very creepy killer, he likes to eat fingers. We got very good perks, Bamboozle, Chlorophobia, Pop Goes the Weasel. For Survivor we got Kate, which is one of the best survivors in my opinion in the game. Kate has some very good perks as well. I think Kate has Dance With Me, which is a very cool perk. Also, this chapter introduced a new variation to Asylum, and I really love this new variation. I think this chapter doesn't really have downsides, and I think this chapter is even better than the chapter with the nurse. So I would put it into the S tier. I know I'm crazy, but I just don't see any downsides with this chapter, okay? Resident Evil Project W with Albert Wesker. I think Albert Wesker is a better killer than Nemesis. I enjoy playing as Albert Wesker more than Nemesis. At least developers tried to rework RPD map with this chapter. Survivors are looking pretty great as always. We got multiple survivors. We got the first kind of anti-camping perk in the game. The only downside is that they tried to rework RPD map with this chapter and they fucked up, and RPD is still the worst map in the game. Also, this chapter was pretty buggy. Albert Wesker was very buggy. Not as buggy as the Twins. The Twins has to be the buggiest killer in the game. But Albert Wesker still feels kind of unpolished when I play Wesker. I would put this chapter into B tier. Probably the best chapter in this category. Okay, Roots of Dread. This chapter was a disappointment because I expected something licensed for the anniversary chapter, and we got an original chapter. But other than that, the killer is very cool. The Dredge is a disgusting looking killer, and the Dredge is able to teleport into lockers, which is a game-changing mechanic. It's just fun to teleport into different lockers and scare survivors. I've had very good moments playing as this killer. Garden of Joy, according to many players, Garden of Joy is a very survivor-sided map. I got to agree with this, yet I really love Garden of Joy. Even when I play killer, I love that map. I don't know, I think that I got very good games on Garden of Joy. The only downside of this chapter is that I don't like the survivor for this chapter. I think even perks in this chapter were not bad. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't really remember what perks we got with this chapter, but the killer itself was really cool. The map really good. Survivor sucks. Maybe a little bit worse than Albert Wesker's chapter, but at least it has a good map. Sadako Rising. I really like Sadako Rising. I really like the movie called The Ring. Also Ringo. I have seen the Japanese version of the movie. It's a pretty cool movie as well. Survivor looks pretty interesting. I really like that yellow kind of hoodie or coat of Yoichi. Sadako is one of the weaker killers in Dead by Daylight. This killer definitely needs to be buffed, but I think it's very fun to play Sadako. There's a very unique playstyle for Sadako. You don't even need to hook survivors, you can just kind of focus on condemning survivors by teleporting as much as possible, and I really find this playstyle fun. I don't think it's a bad chapter by any means, but just because the killer is on a weaker side, it belongs in the middle of the B tier. Probably not better than Ghostface. Okay, Shattered Bloodline. I think that this is one of the best chapters to ever come to Dead by Daylight. Spirit is a very cool looking killer, not to mention she has that booty I would slap all day long. I would bang it in all the styles, horse style, doggy style, I don't fucking care. This chapter has cool perks like Hex Haunted Ground. It also introduced Deliverance. Adam Francis is a pretty decent survivor. The map Family Residence is a really good perk. But fuck, what the fuck am I talking? The map Family Residence is a really good map. I think that it competes with the map from Cursed Legacy chapter. Overall, it's a very decent S tier chapter. I think it's better than the Clowns chapter. Okay, Silent Hill. This chapter is a very good chapter. Pyramid Head is a good killer. Everybody was excited to get to know that Pyramid Head is coming to Dead by Daylight. This killer plays like no other killer. It requires a bunch of skill, and I suck at Pyramid Head. Yeah, overall, this is a very decent chapter besides the map. The map is a bit of a tragedy. I don't like Silent Hill map, Midwich, but the map looks very cool. I will give you that. I think that the way Midwich looks, like visual design wise, it's a very beautiful map. Probably lower A tier chapter. Spark of Madness. Doctor was one of the first killers I have ever played in Dead by Daylight, so very nostalgic for me. Feng Min is my main survivor, and I've been playing her for 6 years now, which is crazy. Doctor is a decent killer. I think it's fun to play against him. I know it's a very controversial opinion. Many people hate Doctor, I don't. It's not a strong killer, but Hospital is not a good map, but it's a very nostalgic map once again. So it definitely belongs on the higher B tier, probably. It's not like this chapter is anything special, but it just brings me a bunch of very good memories, and I totally don't find anything not to like about this chapter, yet it cannot compete with these S or A tier chapters because they are just objectively better than Spark of Madness. So Spark of Madness is a very, very, very fucking good chapter, but it just lacks something to be higher than B tier. Stranger Things. I watched Stranger Things just because of Dead by Daylight. I love Nancy and Steve, especially Steve. Steve has probably the coolest cosmetic item in Dead by Daylight. Steve's Ahoy. I bought that outfit. Demogorgon is probably the most balanced killer Dead by Daylight has ever got. It's a very, very fucking balanced killer. Fun to play. Hawkins was a bit of a shit map. I mean, visually, Hawkins looked absolutely stunning, but gameplay wise, nah, it just wasn't it. But after it got removed, I started to miss Hawkins very much, and I want to play on Hawkins again, and I believe that so do you. So I don't really see any downsides with this chapter, besides that Hawkins wasn't a very pleasant map to play on, but it wasn't a shit map. Did I say before that it was a shit map? Because it wasn't a shit map. S tier, lower S tier actually, lower S tier. Halloween. Haddonfield sucked for many, many years. It was the worst map in Dead by Daylight. Nowadays, it's a pretty good map. I really enjoy playing on Haddonfield. Michael Myers, my favorite stealthy killer in the game. Laurie, very iconic survivor. I love Halloween franchise, and I love the fact that it's in Dead by Daylight. I still think that it's not better than Cursed Legacy or Demise of the Faithful or Shattered Bloodline, but it belongs right here, I think. And the Saw chapter. I like the pig. I enjoy playing as the pig. Against the pig, it's not that much fun. Gideon Meat Plant is a tragic map for killers because it has way too many pallets. It has always had way too many pallets. It has become even a bigger problem after the rework of the map. Detective Tap is not a special survivor. After watching Saw movies, I still don't get why they didn't choose any other survivors. Why did they have to bring Detective Tap? He's not even that important in the movie. Overall, meh. It's not a bad chapter. I'm glad that we have Saw in the game. It's not a great chapter either. Better than the NFT chapter, Hellraiser. Somewhere around here. So I think that overall this is a solid tier list. As you can see, my tier list looks pretty strange, and I know that many of you will disagree. And do I care about it? No, because this is my opinion. But I would be interested to know your tier list. So I will probably, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna leave a link to this tier list in the description down below so you can create your own tier lists. And if you want, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you for watching very much. Don't forget to subscribe for more Dead by Daylight videos. It took me a really long time to make this video, trust me. I would appreciate subscription very much. Thank you very much. I'll see you later. Bye.